Peering back in her direction, he couldn't deny that, as vibrant and dynamic as she still was, Carmen was no longer the woman he remembered meeting as a young boy. Her luscious, thick black hair was now a shock of carefully coiffed white. What had once been voluptuous Cuban curves had thinned with age, and that indomitable energy that had so captured his attention had ebbed somewhat. It was part of the reason why, over the years, she had turned over more and more of her duties to her daughters, grandchildren, and him, of course. As president of Guerrero Enterprises, she had come to rely on him for so much. But this request? What if I go and she says no? It was a very real possibility, considering that they'd had no contact with that part of the family in over 30 years. Carmen chided him with a shake of her head and chuckled softly. Mijo, por favor. I know how persuasive you can be. He couldn't refute that. But his logical side told him to rebuff Carmen's request. If it did become an epic fail, it could only bring her a world of hurt. His emotional side, however, understood only too well what it was like to be missing a piece of yourself. Since the day his family had fled Cuba during the Mariel boat lift, they'd longed for the island they'd left behind. Like so many exiled Cubans, they'd passed that yearning on to their children. But it was a hopeless dream, unlike Carmen's very real wish. A wish that he could help fulfill for a woman who'd given so many so much. Picking up his glass of white sangria, he raised it in a toast and said, "Here's to being persuasive." Carmen smiled, raised her glass, and clinked it against his. "I knew you would do it." A sharp laugh burst from him, and he dipped his head in acknowledgement. "Of course you did, viejita. You were the one who taught me, after all." Jessica Russo closed her eyes and ran her hand across the surface of the tabletop. She had spent the better part of the morning cleaning and sanding off nearly a century of grime and varnish to reveal the beauty of the wood. The oak was smooth beneath her fingers, and she imagined how many hands might have touched the table over the years. The families who might have shared a meal on its surface, or hung out playing a game of cards or doing a puzzle. Families like her own big, boisterous, and loving Italian family. It was one of the reasons she treasured what she did so much, because the pieces spoke to her about the past and the lives they had touched. Bringing the pieces new life was not only emotionally rewarding, it had let her make a nice life for herself and others. Opening her eyes, she cleaned off the last of the sanding dust from the top and legs of the folding table. The piece had called to her as soon as Jessica had spotted it at an upstate flea market, because it was perfect for the New York City millennials and hipsters who frequented her Brooklyn-based shop. With its simple folding legs, the table would fit in a closet or under a bed for those who had smaller apartments and couldn't give up the space to a permanent dining table. Jessica grabbed a can of dark espresso stain from a shelf and a rag to spread the liquid over the surface of the piece. She eased on nitrile gloves and lovingly worked the stain into the oak, running with the grain and removing any excess to make sure the color was even. She had just finished the first application when Sandy, one of the local moms who worked the storefront for her part-time, hurried into her workshop. Sandy seemed a little agitated as she jerked a finger in the direction of the customer area. "There's a man here to see you." Puzzled, Jessica tried to remember if she'd scheduled any appointments for that afternoon, but as far as she knew, she hadn't. "Did you get his name?" she asked. Sandy fidgeted from one foot to the next and wrung her hands together. "He wouldn't give it. He just insisted that I get you. For a private matter," Sandy advised, emphasizing the man's words with air quotes. Weird, Jessica thought. She kept private things to her small circle of close friends and her immense Italian family. Of course, once family got involved, there was no such thing as private. "Does he seem like trouble?" Jessica asked as she yanked off the nitrile gloves with a